Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel and to my March wrap up. So March wasn't exactly the best of months for me. I've not been well for a lot of it. I was quite busy with work and with finalising some bits and pieces for the print run of The Advent of Winter, which is still ongoing, and I can't wait to get that done and dusted and into people's hands. But in terms of the reading, it also wasn't a great month because I just didn't seem to be able to get anywhere early on in the month, and one of the books that I read, for instance, was about 350 or so pages and took me about 3 weeks to read, whereas normally I'd be getting through that in around about a week. That's not a problem though, it doesn't matter. I don't have any targets that mean that I need to be reading and getting through books at a great rate of knots or anything along those lines. It's just a little bit disappointing because I really wanted to get through it and get on to the next books because I was really excited for what I had lined up. So in terms of going through them, I'll do the usual. I'll run through some stats first of all. Timestamps will be down below so you can skip through those if you wish to and just go on to the books. But in terms of the stats themselves, I ended up reading 6 books, and I did have a DNF as well, the first DNF of the year, so I'll go through that one first of all when I talk about the individual books. The total page count of the books that I actually finished was 2,383, taking it to 8,062 for the year to date. Average page count was very close to the total page count, or the average page count for the year. That was sitting at 465. It's now 464 because the average page count of the books that I read, excluding a novella, in March was 463. The average rating, this one did take a bit of a nosedive, or maybe nosedive is a bit extreme, but it was 3.83 for March, taking me to 4.0 for the year to date. In terms of the series, I've now started 7 series. I think I did put that down incorrectly in the previous wrap up because I had one that I missed out on a certain page of my spreadsheet, but it's now at 7 series started for the year. I've got 1 series finished, so I've started putting numbers into that column. I've got 2 now that I've read the first book and decided I'm not going to continue and read book 2 of. 17 series that I'm reading at the moment. I'm up to date. I've read everything that's available so far, and of the total series that I call myself in the middle of, the series I've got ongoing, I've got 32 at the moment. Now, the one stat which is a little bit depressing for me is the days since the last 5-star read. That's now into 3 digits. I'm sitting at 103 days since I last rated a book 5 stars. So I guess that's a bit of a spoiler for the books that I'm going to read. As I said, I'll start off with the DNF. This one was actually my patron pick, and it was Memories of Blood and Shadow by Aaron S. Jones. I just couldn't get into this one, basically. It turns out that the setting of it, or the kind of theme of it, I guess, is one of the sort of tropes that I don't really tend to get on with. It can be done very well, but this one I just didn't get on with, basically. And it's the chronicler kind of trope. It's a bit like The Name of the Wind, where you've got a character in the latter stages of his life, and he's sitting down and telling his story. So you see part of it where it's kind of introduced, you're seeing this character later on, and he's meeting someone who he's going to tell his story to, and then we start going through the story itself. And it just didn't really do anything for me. I guess for me it would have been absolutely fine if it was just the internal story, the story within a story, but you know, that's just my way of looking at it. We started off in the character's own words, pretty much. It was, I'm going to start right at the beginning because we have to start there. So we start off with him as a young boy, deciding, or learning rather, how he got to where he was. And I don't know, because I didn't get that far. I just couldn't get into it. I wasn't interested in this story of a young boy whatsoever. I think from the synopsis, I would have been interested in the later parts of his life, him as an adult, and how he became this great warrior, this kind of legend. But as I say, we just didn't get there because I couldn't get into the story whatsoever, and that was disappointing. So I decided in the end I was taking a while with this one, really not getting very far. I didn't have the enthusiasm for it because I just wasn't invested. So I'll put it down at 13%, which is about 80 pages through what is a 600 and something page book. Then into the books that I did finish, and while I was reading or trying to read that, I had an audiobook going, and this one was Lords of Uncreation by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's book 3 of the final architecture, so this is the first series that I've finished this year. It's part of my ongoing sci-fi audiobook buddy read that I've got with my friend Nina, and I really enjoyed this one. I'm not going to talk too much about the kind of the plot aspects of it because it is a later book in the series and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who's not read those earlier books. But for those who have read book 2, this one basically carried on in much the same vein. I very much preferred book 2 to book 1 because in book 1, Shards of Earth, we did go back and forth a little bit where we were explaining things and we'd see almost flashbacks to say how something came about. And we stopped doing that really in book 2, and we didn't have any of it in book 3 either. I love the characters in here. The narration for the audiobook was great, giving each of the individual characters a distinct voice, and I just really got on well with them. There was some really great humour in it, quite a bit of bad language on behalf of, in particular, one character, and that really endeared that character to me, just the way it was put across, basically, through both the words that were written by the author and the way they were delivered by the narrator. So a great series. I'm really pleased that I finally got round to this one. It was a really good series overall in terms of the individual books and the overall kind of perception of the 3 books together. I gave this one 4.5. It wasn't quite a 5-star read for me, but it was pretty damn close. Then the next book that I finished was one that I mentioned in passing, so to speak, earlier on. It's about 350 pages and I just couldn't seem to get through it very quickly at all, and that is The Last Fire Hunter by Selene Goldenberg. This one is a review copy. It comes out in March. No, it comes out in April, so that's why I was reading it in March. I enjoyed this one. It's just, for some reason, I think with everything else that was going on with me not feeling very well, you might hear that in my voice, I'm struggling for breath still a little bit, and I'm certainly not on top of my game. But with that and with being very busy, I've got house guests at the moment as well, so yeah, lots going on this month. I just couldn't get a good run. I was reading chapters and then putting the book down rather than continue to read, so that was disappointing. I did manage to get myself some free time towards the end of the book and literally ploughed through kind of the last half of it in a day and a half or so, so I wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't enjoying it and if it wasn't well written and so forth. But this one is a Thai folklore inspired fantasy. You've got demons, which are, a lot of them are kind of dragon type characters. You can see kind of on this cover. It's not as easy to tell in this nice review copy. The actual cover, the release cover, has got lots of really nice colours on it, and you can really tell the dragon, it really stands out on that one. But rather than actually being dragons, they are demons or Thai, and we've got a hunter basically who goes around hunting them. On the one hand, it's to protect people because these demons will hunt people in turn, but on the other hand it's for his own benefit and the benefit of his guild, because when you kill one of these demons you harvest it basically. You can take the claws, the tongue, body parts and so forth, and you can sell them because, you know, they're valuable. People use them for whatever purposes, medicines or talismans, whatever it may be. And he comes across a young lady and goes into a contract with her basically to escort her through these demon infested forests. As with usual, I'm not going to go through the plot too much, but I did enjoy it. I don't think it had the most expansive plot. I don't think it had too many twists and turns and side plots or anything along those lines. I think for me the main part here that really made this a good book was the world building. It was really interesting. There were some really weird demons, but they are taken from real life. They're taken from, as I say, Thai folklore. So everything in here, pretty much, as far as I can understand at least, or imagine, everything does have a basis in mythology, folklore and so forth from that part of the world. It was a good book overall. There were some little issues with the writing where I didn't get on with it quite so much, little things that just didn't work for me as well as they might have, but overall it was quite an enjoyable read. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars just because of some of those little aspects that, as I say, didn't quite work for me so well. I am still going to write up a bit more of a detailed review on this one, so when my head's a little bit more straight, I've got a couple of books like this one that I'm going to hopefully do a full video review for, and you can get more in detail into what I did like, what I didn't like, and so forth. But 3.5 stars for this one, definitely a recommendation. It comes out, as I say, I can't remember the date, 9th, there it is on the back, handy for a review copy. Comes out on the 9th of April, so you'll very soon be able to get your hands on a copy. Then another audiobook that I finished, and this one I do have a physical copy, but it's away in a box and that's kind of buried, and I couldn't be bothered to go and dig for it basically. But I listened to a copy of Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Jenny Wirtz. This has been a long time coming. I've read all of the Rift War cycle by Raymond E. Feist, and whenever I'm talking about it, I've got a video talking about the overall series as a whole, and lots of the comments on there, for instance, will be talking about this series, the Empire trilogy, and saying that I should read it and it's one of the best and so forth. I've just never been interested. It wasn't the right time for me. I did try to read it years ago and didn't get into it, didn't get very far whatsoever. That's why it's buried in a box instead of on my shelves. But it's a very political fantasy, and at the time I wasn't really there for it. It wasn't something that really worked for me. I think listening to audio, and now this point in my life with some of the other books that I've read and my developing tastes, it definitely was the right time for me, because I was able to enjoy it. I was able to appreciate those political aspects, whereas in my younger life I wasn't really. So that's definitely a good thing. I had been led to believe that there is a bit more of a crossover with the Rift War, the initial series, so the Rift War saga, so Magician, Silver Fauna, Darkness at Sephinon, for instance. That's not really visible in this book. You've got the war itself is in the background. There are our main character Mara, for instance, her family, basically the men of her family, are on Midkemia battling. They're having this war, but we don't really see it. We don't really see too much of the repercussions, except of course for the absence of those characters and the impact of that. So I don't know whether in the second and the third book in the series we have a bit more crossover. I don't necessarily think that I need that. I probably thought that I might previously before reading the book, because it gives me that familiarity and a little bit that I can build around. But as I say, I don't need that because the book stands on its own absolutely well. I would suggest that you can definitely read this without having read the Rift War saga, so that's obviously a good thing, because it's a second starting off point. Although it is very different because, as I say, it's more political. And I like how in this book you've got this young character who's trying to find her way, basically. She's only, I think, 18 at the start of the book, so she's not this great political player, but you can see the early tendrils of that in the story and how she's potentially going to become that. I like the different things that she did to wind people around her finger, basically, to get them on her side, to get them within her family debt, so to speak, to be owed favours. And I think it was really well done. Some of the little intricacies there were really nice and really interesting. It was a good audiobook as well. I quite liked the narration of it. The story itself I was very much on board for, although I would say not a vast amount happened because of the type of story it was. But that's when I say that I'm normally talking kind of action, because that's what I'm used to in a fantasy, and there wasn't a vast amount in here. There was a little bit, but not too much. I did definitely enjoy it though. I'm looking forward to continuing the series, reading book 2 at some point over the next few months. This is another one that I gave 4.5 stars to. Then I read a book which I've had on my shelf for a while, and this one came out of my TBR jar, I think, as part of my 2024 reading plan, and it's Exile Book 1 of A Kane Legacy by AJ Kelvin. This one is quite a short book, first of all. It's very shiny as well. It's only about 260, I think it was, pages, so it didn't take me too long to get through this one, which was obviously very nice. I don't generally tend to use the term, but I guess it kind of acted a bit like a palate cleanser for me, which was also quite nice. In this one, it kind of feels a bit like a low fantasy. There's not a vast amount of magic or anything along those lines until you get really deep into the book, but the kind of setting that you've got really reminded me of a few others, which are definitely low fantasy, like Tom Dumbrell's Pillars of Peace series, for instance. You've got a royal family, essentially, although they don't really kind of come across as royal, because we're nice and close to them, so it's kind of a familiar feel to them rather than them being these high and mighties, for instance. There's an element of that, but it's not kind of the personality of the main characters that you have, which is good. It's in the first person, and you've got Andrew as our main character is a skin changer. On the cover there you've got this dragon and the human, and that is basically the one person. That is his second form is this dragon, so that's the other part of the kind of the magical, fantastical aspect that you do have within this book. I will say that the kind of dragon human shifter, hybrid, skin changer, whatever you want to call them, is another one of these things that's not one of my favourite tropes, so I was a bit apprehensive when I learned that was what we were going to have in here, but I think the way it was done in this book was actually handled really well. It didn't, it's not something that I minded, basically, so considering I don't normally like it, that's definitely a plus point for this one. We do spend more time with Andrew, and there are plot elements that tell us why that is, and I think that obviously helped because you get to know the character, you get to know the history before you kind of get thrown out of your depth, basically, with all of these fantastical elements about his history, I guess. I like the way that was done. I like the way that the story really developed. It was a very nice kind of flowing story in the way that it opened up different avenues as you learn more. Even though the character's in his 30s, he's still learning and you're learning along with him. And I just thought it was done really, really well. The story is a nice and straightforward one. It was very engaging, very good writing style. I enjoyed it overall. It is one that I'm not going to continue the series with just because there are those elements that I didn't enjoy as much. They're not my favourites, basically, and therefore, although I enjoyed it, I'm quite happy leaving the book where it is. I'm not kind of really excited to go out and get the second book, and therefore I've added this one to my not continuing column in my series list, but it was a good book overall, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Next up was another audiobook. I'd fortunately had some good audiobooks this month to get me through when I was my physical reading was going quite slow. But I read another book from my 2024 reading plan, which is Unconquerable Sun by Kate Elliott. It's been a long time since I've read any Kate Elliott. I think the series was called Crossroads, Traitor Gate, Spirit Gate, and something else Gate. But I read them years ago. I did enjoy them. This one is a sci-fi though, and I've not read any of her sci-fi at all, so I kind of didn't really know what to expect with this one, but I enjoyed it. It's quite a thick, chunky book. The second book is a little bit bigger as well, I think, so that's good. I am, however, waiting for the third one to come out, so I'm going to go into the second one. I'm going to leave it a little while, basically, so I'm not reading the first two close together and then having a long wait for the third book. This one is, a lot of the reviews I've seen, the synopsis, the kind of comp title that you've got on here, so to speak, it's not a title as such, but a lot of the places I read about it say it's a gender-bent Alexander the Great in space. I'm not all up to date with the Alexander the Great story. It's not one that's had a vast amount of interest to me. That didn't matter because I didn't get any tendrils of that in here. I don't know whether it's got any close comparison or anything, but it's going to attract some people. It didn't bother me whatsoever. The story that I got in here, though, I did quite enjoy. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the setting, some of the where it's a sci-fi, some of the kind of far future aspects of it. I really did enjoy, and it's kind of a space opera in many senses, which is pretty much my favourite sci-fi subgenre. I liked some of the space battles that you got in here. I thought they were very well done, and you see it more in terms of the military kind of tactics side of it rather than almost dogfights or anything along those lines, and I really appreciated that. I thought it was very well done, looking at the way that it's all coordinated and the different tactics that you have going in and how you react to what you're seeing in the middle of a battle. I liked that, but also the way it was displayed, in that you had, rather than just kind of a pilot of a ship or the captain or something along those lines, you had some of the, I guess, other elements around that. So you had the technology that they were using to be able to visualize the battle that's happening outside the ship and things like that. I'm not going to go too much into detail of it, because obviously I don't do any spoilers in these wrap-ups, but I thought that was really well handled. It was really interesting, and it just added a nice little aspect to what I was finding as a really good book, actually. I don't think it was the greatest of books. I don't think it had anything that really wowed me, but it was just really easy to listen to. It was a really engaging story, some interesting characters who I want to learn more about, some interesting races as well, because you've got kind of an alien species in there that came in part way through, and I liked that. I thought it was all really well done. It was all very, as I say, engaging, and I'm looking forward to the second book in the series. So this one I gave 4 stars to, and yeah, it's going to be a few months, as I say, but book 2 is definitely on my list. And then because I came to the end of the month and I had a few days left, I decided to pick up a novella from my 2024 reading plan. So I went with Starbinder. That makes it sound a bit like I've got more than one. This is the only novella that's on the list, but I was leaving it rather than planning it in, because I wanted this kind of opportunity. Basically, end of the month, a few days left, I'll pick it up, because it's only I think 70 pages. This is I don't know whether it's book 1.5 or 0.5, however you would call it. It's set about 500 years, is it? Maybe it's a century, I can't remember, but it's set a good few hundred years before The Blood of a Spear by Mark Timoney, which is book 1 of The Eye of Eternity. And it kind of gives us a bit of a background history, basically, of one of the characters who crops up. The name comes up a few times in the series, and I don't know, I kind of feel like this one is therefore one that stands alone, because it's not directly related to the characters of the main series, but also I feel like you have to read book 1 in the series before you get into this one, purely because there's a lot of in-world terminology early on in the book. I remember as I was picking it up, the first few pages, I was thinking to myself, this is one of those where if you were to take the text and put it into Word, you would have lots of red squiggles in the first few pages, because there are all of these words that they're in-world words, basically. They don't mean anything to you unless you've got that grounding. So it can be a bit difficult to get into, I suppose, but obviously I've read the first book in the series. That was okay to me, even though it was a while ago, so it was having to kind of trigger my memory, and I was having to piece together a few of these as I went along. I'll be short and sweet on this one, because it is a short and sweet book, actually, but I don't feel like I got too much out of it. It didn't really expand my my knowledge of the world. Maybe if I'd read it a lot closer to the first book, it might mean a bit more to me, but it's been maybe a year or so since I've read The Blood of the Spear, so you know, that's an opportunity past, I guess. But I don't feel like it gave me too much in here. It was nice, it was a pleasant read, but it's not one that I think is going to kind of stick with me for too long. So that's fine. It's just a nice little addition to the series rather than an integral part of it. So I'm quite pleased with that. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. So there we go, that's my March wrap up done. Hopefully the next video I'll be a little bit more on top form, because I'm still recovering from this illness. As I say, you might be able to hear that in my voice, and I keep having to stop to catch my breath, so hopefully that won't be going on for too much longer. Hopefully you had a good March as well. Let me know in the comments down below what your favourite book was that you read last month. I'll hopefully catch you in the next video sometime soon. Until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.